A Tenjin virtual assistant can be connected to ServiceNow by the configuration of the Tenjin ServiceNow skill. Once a virtual assistant has been connected to ServiceNow, this then allows an end user accessing the Tenjin assistant, perhaps via the Microsoft Teams chat interface, allows that user to check the status of any open instance against their name, perhaps add a comment to that incident. It will allow them to search the knowledge base in ServiceNow or raise a new incident in ServiceNow or request, all within that familiar chat interface in Microsoft Teams. So how do you configure that? This session is going to look at how you configure that skill and make that initial connection. Now, within this virtual assistant here, Tenjin, you can see we have two skills that have been associated so far, the Q&A skill and the document search skill. To connect the assistant to ServiceNow, we want to add the ServiceNow skill. So we click on the Add Skill button, and then here we have the Add ServiceNow skill. So a few things here. We are presented with this dialog, and we need the ServiceNow URL and a username and password of a service account that can access ServiceNow with the correct credentials. For a one-off task, a ServiceNow application does need to be installed on the ServiceNow side, which will allow one or more virtual assistants from Tenjin to connect to that ServiceNow instance. Now, this is a one-off task and is outside the scope of this video, and we're going to assume that that's already been done, and we're just looking at the tasks that need to be done each time you connect a new virtual assistant to the ServiceNow environment. For more information on how to install that application and this whole process, there is online help available within the window here, and it does include information on the permissions that service account that you're typing the credentials for here need to access ServiceNow in order for the Tenjin skill to work. So let's put in our credentials here. So I know, for example, that our ServiceNow URL is this one, and we have a username, and now I can hit OK, and what happens now is that the Tenjin virtual assistant sends a message to ServiceNow and says, hello, this is a new assistant, and I'm ready for configuration, so please create a record over in ServiceNow. And if I just scroll down, we'll see that the ServiceNow skill has been added here, but it does say configuration required. So if I click on view, here we have the information that we typed in earlier. So there's the ServiceNow URL and the admin, and I've got a test connection button. So if there was some other problem, we can still click here and test the connection. And we can see here that the connection's failed. The connection to ServiceNow is okay, but the connection from ServiceNow to Tenjin has failed because the client ID is not set. Well, what does that mean? That means that we actually need to generate another set of credentials that ServiceNow uses to connect back into Tenjin. So Tenjin's connecting to ServiceNow with that service account that we've already put in, but ServiceNow can't connect back to this assistant because it hasn't got any credentials. So what we need to do now is set up the assistant over in ServiceNow with the right credentials. So let's go over to ServiceNow first of all and have a look for a record that corresponds with this assistant. So what is this assistant? How do we identify it? Well, you'll see here that there's a generate credentials button, and we're going to need to use this for two things. So I'm clicking the button. First of all, we need to know what the client ID is, which is that, and we also need to know what the client secret is, which is this string here that's randomly generated. So we're going to need both of those pieces of information in ServiceNow in order to make this second connection back from ServiceNow into Tenjin work. So in this other tab of my browser, I'm already logged into ServiceNow. So let's just refresh this screen here. So I found the plugin in ServiceNow, the application, by typing Tenjin in the search box here, and here's the assistant list. So we notice that our client ID is Tenjin 2124 ServiceNow. So if I copy that and we go back into ServiceNow, we actually can see at the top that the most recently created assistant here, sure enough, is Tenjin Dev 2124. So if we drill into this, it gives us some information about the record that's been created. And what we need to do now is configure this with authentication, those two pieces of information from that Tenjin ServiceNow skill credentials dialog. So I'm going to click on authentication because it's completed all of the other information on this screen correctly. So here we have Tenjin client ID and Tenjin client secret, and these are the two fields here. So client ID is that, so let me copy that, paste that in, and then the client secret is this one here, so I'm going to click that to copy that and paste that in here. So once that's been entered, we can click update. Go back in here, and we have if we want to, we can test the connection. So if I click on test the connection here, this now is saying that the callback from ServiceNow into Tenjin is successful. And we can confirm that back in Tenjin by going here and clicking the test connection button again. And the connection is now correct. So now we've connected Tenjin to ServiceNow, we can see how that might look for an end user using Microsoft Teams. So if I go to Microsoft Teams, here's our Tenjin virtual assistant that's been added into Teams. And one of the options that you now see when a user first accesses the system is that there is an option for ServiceNow. So clicking on this button will now give a user three options: view instance, raise a form if there is any forms available, or I'm done. If a user clicks on view incidents, the first time that this happens, the user is prompted to enter an email address. And what will happen now is that an email is sent to the user with the correct code. Typing in the reply, connects the user to ServiceNow, and straight away we can see that the system has brought back the instance that user has open, so a number of incidents there. And then the user can click on one of these instances and get further information about that incident and add a comment if they so desire. Yeah, so all okay now. So to recap, what we've done today in this session, we've gone to our virtual assistant Tenjin, we've added the ServiceNow skill, entered credentials to connect to ServiceNow. Over in ServiceNow, we've found the corresponding assistant record and entered the client ID and secret that were given to us in the ServiceNow skill. Confirmed that the connection was working both ways, from Tenjin to ServiceNow, from ServiceNow back to Tenjin, and then we went into Teams and we just had a look at how a user might see their incidents. In ServiceNow, we can also configure the knowledge base in ServiceNow to be made available within Tenjin, and also allow users to raise forms that create instance or requests in ServiceNow, and we're going to look at those in the next session.